Okay, thanks Alison. Yeah, thanks everyone for hanging around for the last session. It's always difficult at the end of 2 days. Probably a couple of things first up. This is basically a group effort here, a massive undertaking by a lot of people, so I'm just the spokesperson for the day. Second thing is I've got about 10 minutes to talk about 5 years of marine parks implementation, so it's a challenge. So for those that aren't familiar with marine parks in South Australia, we've got 19 marine parks across the state. They're multiple use marine parks, so they've got different zoning types and arrangements in each park. Probably the most important ones from a biodiversity conservation perspective are the sanctuary zones or the no-take zones, which comprise about 5% of state waters. So the network itself is 44% of state waters, and so the sanctuaries are quite a small percentage of that, and pretty difficult to see on the map there. So probably an important point to note here is that we've got some pretty strong legislation behind this. So we've got the Marine Parks Act in 2007, and in 2012 the parks came into being with the management plan. So for each of the 19 marine parks there's a management plan with 15 strategies in each plan. Those management plans were fully implemented in October 2014 when the sanctuary zones were fully implemented and basically the no-take side of things came into it. So the way that we deliver these strategies of the Act is through 4 programs. We've got the Protection, Stewardship and Compliance and Performance program, and I'll talk about those in more detail as we get to them. We've got this kind of circular feedback here where we've got monitoring and research, and I just want to mention that research is an important part of the program, not just the monitoring side of things. We've got evaluation and reporting, so your classic sort of MER framework. We've highlighted out to the side there the knowledge management, and that's very important for our agency and the state government. All of our reports go up on Envirodata SA. We've got the open data policy, so when basically data are available and accessible, we put them up on Envirodata SA. And basically what this diagram's showing is that the management plans say that we must review the management plans within 10 years. So by 2022 they've got to have their first review. So what we did at the end of 2017 was we did a 5-year status report on where we were at with the marine parks basically. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So we've got this nice glossy report, 500 pages of work, a lot of effort went into that. Basically summarising all the activities and some of the outcomes of the marine parks. So available online for those that want to read it. There's also a short summary version of that status report. So this diagram here, I won't go into too much detail, but it's basically summarising what the management plans are trying to achieve. They're trying to alleviate some of the pressures on the marine environment. So we've got the management plans highlighted there in green, so you can see they interact with the pressures on the ecological values. So the first part of this status report was basically looking at everything that we've done in that 5 years, the first 5 years in terms of those programs and the strategies against the management plans. So I'll quickly whiz through each of the programs and just basically highlight some of the activities that were undertaken over those first 5 years. Obviously I can't highlight everything. There was an enormous amount done in the first 5 years. So the protection program deals with all the policy, the zoning, regulations that go with each of the parks. You can see from that diagram there that they're quite complicated. This particular park, there's multiple zones, there's other things happening in there, there's aquaculture, special purpose areas and so forth. So we have a permit system in place. Over that period of time, 160 permits were issued, and importantly 94 of those were for research. So we encourage research, and it's not just a red tape thing, collecting or making people get the research permits, but it also enables us to keep a track on where research is happening, and also there could be cumulative impacts of the research itself, but we need to know what sort of research is occurring, whether it's could be detrimental or invasive. Just as an example, 13 major developments were reviewed through the protection program. So that's an important side of what they do. The compliance program, obviously it's very important to have compliance, especially of the no-take sanctuary zones. So we use a range of technologies there to undertake surveillance. And you can see here that over 7,000 patrols of different kinds, shore boat and aerial compliance patrols over the period. Quite a number of incidents were detected, as you'd expect, and there was education letters, warnings, and the final step is the expiation notices. So people get a first warning the first time they're caught doing the wrong thing in a sanctuary zone. There was a big effort put into educating fishers, especially with recreational fishing guides. Over 300,000 copies have been circulated across the state over that period of time. And also the zoning signs, you would have seen one in the background there, is another important part of the compliance program, basically putting those in strategic locations around the state, boat ramps, access points where people can see what the zoning is so that they can be educated and do the right thing. The stewardship program, really important part of the Marine Parks program. That's about educating people about the marine parks, but also about the marine environment itself. Ultimately, we want people to love the marine environment and care for it themselves, and which will then lead to self-compliance. So a lot goes into this area. Lots of school type events that happen around the state. A lot of presentations have been given. We estimate they've reached over 6,000 community members. And then, there's community events. We've been to boat shows, all sorts of outdoor events, talk to people, hand out the rec fishing guide, other pieces of information. So we estimate, we've reached a lot of people across the state. And we also get involved in citizen science projects. And I just saw the previous session then was on citizen science projects, and we've got a few that we're involved with as well. And finally, the performance program. So that's the area that I'm involved in. So basically we look at the performance of the overall Marine Parks program in terms of the activities that the different programs are undertaking, but also we monitor a whole range of indicators to look at whether we're seeing the changes that we expect or predict in ecological and socio-economic values. So we've got a whole range of ecological and socio-economic indicators. We can't do that alone. The Marine Parks program is a whole of government initiative. We collaborate, partner with other government agencies, universities, and we get data from external sources as well, such as the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So, there's a lot that goes into it. So just a few snippets. We've interviewed over 2,000 people in annual phone surveys, and that's only since 2012. Those surveys commenced in 2005, so we've got a 10-year data set there. We did some work to the fish markets, and I can see someone in the crowd who might have initiated that with some forward thinking, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. 120 diver surveys across the state in 10 sanctuary zones, 7 marine parks, and baited remote underwater video surveys. We've done a lot of those, and that's something that started in 2012, and it's a big part of our program. So we've undertaken a lot of activities, obviously, but the key to this is, are they resulting in any change to ecological values? So I've highlighted the ecological box there. So what we want to see is, by doing those management strategies, are we seeing any changes or maintenance of the ecological values? So, the thing is with the sanctuary zones, they've only been in place for 3 years, since October 2014 at the time we did this, so it doesn't give a lot of time for things to change. Things in the marine environment grow slowly, often there's low fecundity, those types of things, so you won't expect to see a lot of change in the first 3 years. So, but a few things we can say, we've probably got the largest ongoing marine biodiversity monitoring program now in the state with everything that's going on with the program and with the collaborations. We feel that the network has captured the biodiversity that's on offer. In particular, in terms of comparing inside with outside sanctuary zones, they're quite similar in the assemblages we've got, so we feel that we're capturing that within our sanctuary zones. And we feel that we're maintaining the biodiversity, but it's very early days. It's like 3 years. However, there is some evidence of a positive response there in one particular study that we had. So I'll just put up a few of these. These are some case studies from the status report. And there's 11 of these in the status report, and they basically, they tell a little story about some of the better things that we did in the first 5 years and how they relate to the management plan strategies and whether there's any ecological or socio-economic outcomes from those. So this one here, you obviously won't be able to read it, but this one's about monitoring offshore islands. And you can see there's the SARDI vessel in the lower left corner there, a collaboration we did there with SARDI Aquatic Sciences to enable us to get out to some of these offshore islands and survey them. And just a little bit of data here, you can see that this is consistently showing up that on the left-hand side of the axis there, you've got a number of islands, including Kangaroo Island. They're biodiversity hotspots, basically, when compared to other sanctuary zones within the network. This was a study we did in partnership with SARDI and the rock lobster industry. We've highlighted this as a case study. And basically, it was a really positive response to the sanctuary zone in only 28 months since after the sanctuary zone was put in place. So these data are taken from the SARDI report, Lockie McClay et al. So you can see here we've got some data that they were able to pull out from historical pot sampling. This is showing catch rate, kilograms per pot lift. And you can see that that's tracking the greens inside, the blues outside, tracking along the same for about 20 years, and then after 28 months, that was the response we saw. So quite a strong response, but totally expected and predicted based on what we know and what we've seen in sanctuary zones and lobsters in other parts of the country, in Tasmania, New Zealand, and so forth. So that was really pleasing to see that, and it also reinforced that probably compliance had been good in that zone, and the commercial fishers had respected the zone itself and not undertaken illegal fishing. Just quickly, some socio-economic stuff. The park management plans can work in a positive but also potentially a negative way on socio-economic values. Thank you. And so really in a snapshot of that is that all of the observations we had on the indicators we had, that they were consistent with predictions. Support for marine parks has been high on a state level for 10 years and remains high. It's probably about at its highest point now, actually. That comes from our phone survey data, and also there's no real evidence of any negative regional impacts. So, we looked at a number of things: house prices, commercial fisheries value, catch, tourism, fish prices, and so I mentioned that before, and so that's one of the case studies we looked at. And before the sanctuary zones came into being, there was talk that fish prices would go up because it would be harder to catch fish because of the sanctuary zones, and so we've been tracking that for 3 years. So this is just a zoom in on that graph there. You can see that we've got this baseline point here in the winter 2014, and that's highlighted by that horizontal dotted line there. And basically the winter fish prices are the same in 2016, 2017 as they were in 2014. So that was pretty good evidence. So in conclusion, is delivering. In terms of statutory obligations, we're on track because we're basically undertaking all the activities that the management plans and the strategies are saying that we should do. We're observing changes that were predicted, but again, it's early days with the ecological side of things, but it doesn't appear that we're seeing any major negative socio-economic impacts. And out of this report, we'll basically develop recommendations to guide the program over the next 5 years. So I've got through 5 years work in 10 minutes, so thank you. And obviously, 1 million people to thank, and you won't be able to read that, but